Yeah. We'll be with you in just another minute. All right. Good morning. Welcome to the final day of the 2024 American Gem Trade Association Tucson Elevated Seminar Series, sponsored by the American Gem Society. This particular session has been altered just a little bit, and I'm going to have John Ford, the CEO of AGTA, explain what we're going to do for the next hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. Okay? Thank you very much. John?
Thank you, Gary. Unfortunately, I have a little disappointing news. We are not going to be able to discuss the Colorado School of Mining project with Jenna White. We had hoped that she would be able to participate by Zoom, but she was involved in a very severe accident which caused her to fracture her foot in multiple places. And she's unable to come to Tucson, and this morning she's unable to participate. We don't know exactly. 6 to 8 weeks is the best prognosis on her recovery. Any of y'all that are friends of Jenna, I would appreciate if you would send her an email or a social media post and wish her getting well very quickly. And but we're going to continue on without her. It is, since this is an independent research study and the person that's done the research is not here present, what we're going to do is we're going to continue on to the second segment. And Dr. Nicole Smith of the Colorado School of Mines is going to have a very vigorous discussion on mining. And at this point, I'm going to invite Dr. Smith to take over the program. And I hope that you enjoy very much our session. Thank you.
Thanks, John, and good morning, everybody. As John said, I'm Nicole. I'm from the Colorado School of Mines, and we are a public research university located in Golden, Colorado. We have about 7,000 undergraduate and graduate-seeking, degree-seeking students, so we're not all that big. And for those of you who don't know, most of our programs are focused on engineering and applied scientists. And so I'm a cultural anthropologist, and you might wonder why I'm at the Colorado School of Mines. I'm actually, my faculty appointment is in the mining engineering department. And when I was hired, it was at a time when the mining industry became acutely aware that one of the biggest barriers to developing mines and producing minerals was social license to operate, or social acceptance of these large developments. So they brought me in, and I always say that I teach engineers to think about people and the impacts that their projects have on people and how people might be able to benefit more, and how mining could be done more responsibly. So just kind of a background, and I will say, I got my start in mining in gemstones, and for my PhD research, actually lived in Tanzania for a year and worked with Maasai Tanzanite traders. So they weren't mining, but they were trading Tanzanite. And so got my introduction to mining through the Maasai Tanzanite traders. And then since then, I've done a lot of work on artisanal and small-scale gold mining in countries of Latin America. And now, as I'm sure you all know, there's a big race to secure critical mineral supply chains. So some of my work has been focused on how can we procure the minerals that we need for energy transitions in a responsible and sustainable way. So just a little bit of background on who I am and where I come from. And I want to introduce our panelists, but first I'm really excited about this panel, and our goal is to have an informative, thought-provoking discussion that provides insights and fosters knowledge exchange about responsibility in gemstone supply chains. And I think there are a lot of different ways to think about responsibility and to operationalize responsibility. And what's unique about our panelists today is that it's one model for thinking about responsibility. It's a specific and unique focus, which is on vertically integrated gemstone companies. And so this means there's a direct connectivity between mining, value-added, and sales and marketing. And so that is a unique model, and I'm excited that we have our panelists today. So we hope to discuss during this next amount of time with you all, how and to what extent this business model provides opportunities and maybe also challenges for responsibility in gemstone supply chains. So without further ado, I want to introduce our panelists. And first to my right, I'm sure you all know, we have Bruce Bridges. And by way of introduction, Bruce is the son of Campbell Bridges, the discoverer of the vivid, pure green variety of garnet we all know and love as Tsavorite. And Campbell was the person to bring the first variety of blue zoisite, or tanzanite, for identification to the U.S. And Campbell Bridges was also Tiffany & Company's official consultant geologist on tanzanite. And just kind of a fun anecdote, when I was writing my dissertation, I came across news stories about this discovery and Campbell bringing the gemstone to Henry Platt at Tiffany & Company, and there's a quote from Henry Platt that says, "This is the most important gemstone discovery in 2,000 years." So I always enjoyed it. And then years later, I was able to meet Bruce, so kind of connected all the dots, and it was really neat. So Bruce has been intimately involved in the gem industry since childhood, working side by side with his father. He grew up in Kenya and has completed extensive fieldwork in the Taita Taveta region of southern Kenya. He is the president of Bridges Tsavorite and carries on the family tradition of 3 generations of gemstone miners and dealers in Africa. The family business is headquartered in Nairobi, with its sales distribution headquartered in Tucson. And the company is proud to maintain its fully integrated operation, which includes every aspect from mining, sorting, grading, and cutting to marketing and sales. In addition, Bruce has both published and lectured extensively on Tsavorite throughout the world. Bruce previously served as the first vice president of the AGTA and completed a 6-year term as director of the International Colored Gemstone Association. In 2017, he was appointed to the advisory board of the University of Arizona Gem and Mineral Museum, a rival of our Colorado School and Mines Geology Museum, as well as the advisory board of the Gemstones and Sustainable Development Knowledge Hub. So let's welcome Bruce. And then to his right, we have John Ferry from Prosperity Earth. And John is the founder and CEO of Prosperity Earth, a vertically integrated mining and gem cutting company. His company is a world leader in traceable and sustainable colored gemstone mining, bringing world-class products to market and prosperity to communities through full-time, on-the-ground presence with professionalized mining. John has worked in Madagascar since 2008. He's a Harvard graduate, cum laude, 1998, and an alum of Harvard Business School's Program for Leadership Development. John proudly produces this incomparable, beautiful gemstone we know and love as demantoid. Previously, John was CEO of an award-winning Madagascar chocolate and vanilla company, and prior to this, spent a decade on Wall Street as managing director at Merrill Lynch. So let's welcome John. Great. So we're going to start out just with some background, and I'm wondering if John and Bruce, if you could tell us a little bit about your operations, where your mine's located. We know what you're mining, but your years in operations, some background, and then what vertical integration looks like to your business.
Thank you very much, Nicole, for that kind introduction, and thank you everybody for being here today. So as far as exactly where we're located in Kenya, we're located in Taita, southern Kenya. So that's, if someone looks at a map, that's right across the border there from Tanzania. And we have been mining in East Africa since 1967. My father is pretty much the father of colored gemstone mining in East Africa, of course, being the discoverer of Tsavorite, which is the national gemstone of Kenya, as well as the first person that, as Nicole mentioned, to bring Tanzania to the US, which is the national gemstone of Tanzania. As far as vertical integration in our company is concerned, we were the first company in East Africa, first mining company in East Africa, to be 100% vertically integrated from mine to market. And not only do we mine the product, but we sort, grade the product and cut all product. Anything that would yield above 50 points in size, we cut in country of origin, keeping value in country of origin. And all of our cutters are local Kenyan cutters. My father learned to cut in Niederoberstein, Germany in the early 70s, which is, at the time, was a standard for colored gemstone cutting in the world. He took those methods to Kenya and started to train local cutters in 1979, and we have proudly cut everything above, again, 50 points in-house in Kenya, locally trained Kenyan cutters to German standards, and the quality of our cutting was always something that we prided ourselves on. So with that being said, we've been in East Africa since the mid-60s, but in Kenya since 1970. And just a quick bit of history, my father discovered Tsavorite in Tanzania in 1967. The mines were nationalized in 1970 by then President of Tanzania, Julius Nyerere, and my father traced the strike of Tsavorite from Tanzania into Kenya, and in 1970 rediscovered Tsavorite in Kenya, and hence why I grew up in Kenya instead of Tanzania. So with that being said, over 54 years now in Kenya, and our mines, we have multiple mines, but some might have heard of our largest mine, which is the Scorpion mine, and that is our main producing Tsavorite mine, and has been the single largest producing Tsavorite mine in history. And that would be a quick summary, so I'll pass it to you, John.
Thank you, Bruce. I didn't think Bruce would need the microphone, but I certainly do. I want to make a general comment before I answer Nicole's question, and it's wonderful and humbling to be up here speaking to all of you. There's so many friendly faces and people that I've known in the audience, so it's wonderful to see friends and new interested parties alike. I think the one common thread and the great thing that AGTA does is, while there's a lot of differences in terms of where someone might reside in the value chain or what their specialty or their niche is as relates to gemstone or the role that they might play, there's a lot of heart and a lot of passion that goes into the industry that we're in, and it's definitely a beautiful industry that we're in. So it's the first step. Congratulations to all of you for attending this and being part of the conversation. I think, as Nicole mentioned, we represent, Bruce and I in our respective companies, represent one specific type of mining, which is not the best. We're obviously very proud of what we do, think it's very efficient, and we'll talk, I'm sure, a lot of the nitty-gritty details about what makes it unique, but it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's not possible in some venues, so This is really, I think, a start of a good dialogue about a lot of the specific aspects that we're proud to introduce about what we do, and hopefully, pieces that, if not the full vertical integration, that can be emulated by other interesting parties. And one thing I would like to say too, just before I talk a little bit about myself, is, Bruce and his family have been a big inspiration for us, Prosperity Earth. I'm about the same age as Bruce, but with a lot less experience, which I'll get into in a moment. But when I started out in the business, in the color gemstone business, we took a lot of the same practices in terms of value added in country, the focus on sustainability, and for us, really the word that captures kind of the essence of what we do, which is prosperity. And we looked at, who were some of the pioneers and trailblazers in the industry that we're in today. And Bruce and his family were certainly at the top of that list for the decades-long experience and commitment they had made to the continent of Africa and best practices and professionalism. So I know I've said it to you before, but I want to say it in a public forum that you and your family and your dad and what you guys have done for the industry has been incredible and certainly an inspiration for me. So with that said, if I remember the question correctly, it was about vertical integration, and for us it's very simple. It's the connectivity between three nodes of business, and the three nodes are mining, where the essence of what we all do at AGTA starts. It's extracting beautiful gems and minerals out of the ground, connecting mining with value added. For us, value added is not only gem cutting, but it's also the preparation of mineral specimens. My partner is a famous Italian geologist, Dr. Federico Pizzotta, who has one of the best mineral specimen labs in the world in Milan, Italy. He's been in the game for 30 years, a trained geologist with a specialty in pegmatite, tourmalines in Madagascar. So we're blessed to have a great partnership with him, where not only does our mine produce beautiful demantoid gems, but it produces incredible mineral specimens. And the basic rule of thumb for us for value added is, if it doesn't come out as a loose crystal, if it's a gem that's attached to matrix, it goes to Federico into his lab, and they can evaluate if they can make a beautiful nature's work of art. And that's the second node of the business, is what I generally call the value added, and the third being sales and marketing. And interestingly enough, here in Tucson, quite far removed geographically from the mines in Africa where we operate, sales and marketing obviously is a extremely crucial business, and it's very time consuming to present your products well and professionally. Bruce talked a little bit about grading and sorting. Obviously, the quality of the cutting matters tremendously depending on who the client is. So there's so many aspects that go into those three nodes of mining, value added, and sales and marketing, that if you get any one part of those inputs wrong, the output comes out a little bit funny. And I'm sure there's a lot of funny war stories that we can share about, some of the trials and tribulations in the field and mining, and also value added when you think you're, going down one path and it turns out differently. But suffice to say, one of the things for us that is special about vertical integration is the ability, not necessarily the eventuality, but the ability to control inputs with an eye towards also controlling outputs. And that's something that is extremely important in our industry, where precision matters. And of course, I'm sure we're going to get into it quite a bit today. Ethics and business practices and professionalism also matter, not only in Tucson, but where the supply chain starts at origin, treating people right. And the interesting thing about, convening a big group like this is that there's a lot of different semantics and words that kind of get attached to, different parts of the business. And I think my general view is that the color gem business today, compared to where it's come from, even when I first started out about 9-10 years ago in the business, is in a really good spot where there's a vibrant discussion and a lot of interest and participation. So very excited to get into talking about that here today, and hopefully at the end we can have some time to talk about, a little bit of question and answer. So I turn it back to you, Nicole.
Just just jot them down and we'll come back to it. And we're kind of doing the microphone shuffle here, so thanks for your patience. Great. So thank you for that. Now that we've learned a little bit about your backgrounds and how your companies are vertically integrated, could you elaborate on why you think this is a good business model? What have been some of the benefits of a vertically integrated business model?
Thank you for the question, Nicole. I'd be happy to answer that. As far as our business model is concerned, it really has to do with provenance, where if we really look at the big picture, very few have any idea where those gems actually came from and how they came to market. So with my father, he was the first to be cognizant of the environment in which the gemstones were mined in East Africa. And I remember actually when I was a child, people would almost make fun of us for some of the mining practices that we had, where instead of open cast mining that removes a lot of the topsoil and causes a lot of disturbance to the earth and environment, he chose to tunnel as soon as possible. Which is far more surgical, but tunneling is an expensive way of mining. It also takes expertise to mine. And if one visit the mining fields in Kenya and Tanzania, mostly you'll see large mine dumps all over the place and large open cast pits, as opposed to our mine that from the very beginning, my father, if you were to visit it, it's pretty much like an oasis in a semi-arid region. And not only did he plant trees, work with KWS, which is the Kenya Wildlife Service, on anti-poaching operations, but also the way that we mined. He used water catchment tanks instead of bringing in water for the mine operations. So he built underground tanks, water catchment areas where all the roofs, everything would siphon in, and a lot of people thought we were crazy in the old days. And like I said, I remember many a conversation where people would almost make fun of us for the way that we did things, but that's really what my father was about. And he wasn't into the industry to be the richest man in the world and to just sell the most amount of gems humanly possible. He looked at it as a way of life, and I know sustainability gets thrown around way too much these days, and also that just inherently mining is unsustainable, right? So at the end of the day, every single mine in the world has an end of life. However, how could you be a generational miner? So I'm third generation family member mining in Africa, and my father figured that this was inheritance not just for his family, but Kenya at the time, which was the country that had taken us in from Tanzania. So it was something that was just at the ethos of what we did. And it's something that I'm proud to say we've carried on to this day. And I think if one were to do a flyover of our mine and see what it looks like, you'd have a very different bird's eye view than pretty much any other mine you could possibly see in the region. I think that's an aspect that thankfully after all these years, if we look back, I mean we're going back almost 60 years now that we've been mining in that way, and it's nice to finally see more people talk about it, more people caring about it, and it becoming a point of discussion as being a good thing instead of perhaps an eccentricity of a single individual that maybe went against the mold at the time. But I think my father was a very forward-thinking person, and that's just who he was. So I'm very proud of that legacy, and it's something that, to the best of my ability, and I'm not a shadow of what my father was, but to the very best of my ability, I try to continue to this day.
I think echoing some of Bruce's sentiments, I'll approach it a little bit differently with a couple of anecdotes. For us, vertical integration is about achieving efficiency. And when we did a lot of our kind of on-the-ground due diligence of what it takes to be a successful miner or participant in the supply chain, the fact of the matter is the challenges are very, very substantial, starting with geology, understanding, how to interpret whether or not the grade or the effort is worth the payoff. Nicole, you mentioned mine engineering. Bruce, I know you talked about a lot of kind of novel innovation your family did with respect to tunneling. Tunneling, if you don't have a background in mine engineering or know how to properly tunnel, it's extremely dangerous. I've seen this traveling all over Madagascar where, again, sometimes it's kind of a personal calculation, like all of us. Do you want to go into the ocean when the waves are high? You swim at your own peril sometimes. Mining's a little bit like that, unfortunately, where people on the margin sometimes make the calculation to go down unsafe tunnels. We take I alluded to it earlier about controlling inputs and trying to do things in the safest, most efficient way possible. So you kind of see, we also use light mechanization. So, for instance, I know there's a question earlier about use of technology in the field. If there was one instrument that could tell the miner, with the XRF machine or LIBS machine, laser ablation, could tell you exactly with precision, it's Tsavorite or it's demantoid, and it's high grade, then there would be no need for any of us here. There's a certain level of kind of education, and for many of us in this industry, it's decades long, trials and tribulations and research and hard work that goes into it. And that's just on the mining end of things. Once you actually find something that is Tsavorite or demantoid or another beautiful gem, the whole art of adding value to that gem is a whole nother discipline. So again, you could put a tremendous amount of effort into extracting something out of the ground in the best possible way, environmentally sensitive, socially sensitive, but then you make a big miscalculation or a mistake on the cutting, and you're not necessarily adding value, you're maybe destroying value or leaving the vast majority of the value kind of on the cutting table. So for us, vertical integration has really been about, I come from kind of a business background, but one of the big reasons why I left Wall Street was there wasn't a lot of soul. I was getting paid a lot of money, was getting promoted, could have stayed there, could have continued to do that, but I wanted to do something that was a little more tangible, and also something that spoke to my heart and where I felt like I could give back. So Prosperity Earth, before we started Prosperity Earth, was Prosperity Equity, investing in other projects, which, as Nicole mentioned in the introduction, was chocolate and vanilla in Madagascar, with exactly the same ethos of what we do in mining, but just a different product, something that's really beautiful, high value, lends itself to value added in country and expansion of market. So to answer your question, it's really for us control of inputs, not because we're control freaks, but because we want to achieve efficiency, we want to achieve good business scale to make business more sustainable. Business, there's a certain level of market efficiency with being a for-profit business, in the sense that the market's constantly giving you feedback. If you miscut a gem or you're mispricing a gem, all the way at the end of the supply chain, the market's going to let you know. They may not tell you directly to your face. They may be polite and say, you know what, these gems aren't for us. But there's a certain level of efficiency for us with respect to the market that we really believe in, and that's why we kind of, having the background in chocolate and vanilla value added in a vertically integrated business model there, again, one of the first in all of Africa, where the vast majority, I think 2/3 of the world's cocoa is grown. We're a pioneer in value added in that specific business. We then kind of carried that over to colored gems and drafted upon, I think, a lot of things that you talked about, Bruce.
Thank you. And John, you sort of indicated some of the challenges, but I'd like to dive in a little bit deeper. And we've heard about some of the benefits to John and Bruce of vertically integrated business models, but what are some of the challenges you've experienced with that?
Ooh, there are a lot of challenges with vertical integration. It is much more difficult being a mine owner than it would be a gem dealer. Being a gem dealer is exponentially easier. Dealing with licenses and governmental authorities, corruption, greed, jealousy, as a mine owner I've seen every spectrum one could possibly see in being a mine owner, as well as seeing that greed and jealousy culminate in the assassination of my father and attempted assassination of myself and continued death threats against myself and my family. So it's something that challenges, if we look at mining law in East Africa, mining law in Kenya is based on English mining law. If you look at the actual law in the books, it's very good. If people were to uphold the rule of law that's on the books, it would be smooth sailing, and you would see a lot more heavy investment in the mining sector in a professional way in East Africa in particular. And I know that John has a lot of stories of Madagascar with the same challenges, but in Kenya, for instance, it's simply the reality of the situation that mining law is seldom upheld. And I mean, for example, NEMA, which is the National Environmental Management Authority in Kenya, we were the first mine in Kenya to have NEMA certification, and we were always seen as the standard for colored gemstone mining in East Africa. My father would go overseas representing Kenya, trying to bring in foreign investment. He was the founding chairman of the Kenya Chamber of Mines, which is a professional organization of Kenyan local miners to better the industry. However, even with all of that being said, to make a long story short, if we look at what happened with us, you had two local politicians who teamed up with the local gangster. They decided they wanted what we have, and when they couldn't threaten us to get rid of us, they decided killing us was the best option. And we have had constant issues with illegal mining on our mining claims, and while the mining ministry in Kenya might write letters to evict and get rid of the illegal miners, at the end of the day, if the police don't enforce said eviction, they're still there. And it's simply a situation where I've seen countless times that while the mining law might be good on the books, that corruption, greed, and money changing hands take precedent. And I think that we are one of the truest, or one of the best case studies to see exactly what happens there. I mean, even now, so we lost my father. This will be at the end, in August of this year, will be 15 years. And right now we have a larger legal mining team mining on our GG2 hill, which is the mining claim that my father was murdered over. And you also have to understand that there, in a lot of these situations, you have cartels, organized crime involved, and challenges. It is an extraordinarily challenging situation when you're dealing with entities that are far more powerful than any individual miner. I mean, in Kenya, you have Mungiki involved in mining. Mungiki is the largest mafia organization in Kenya. The government is scared of Mungiki. And if an entity is strong enough for the government to be scared of, what's going to happen to a miner, right? So, Nicole, when you ask about challenges, it is an extraordinarily difficult issue, being a miner in East Africa. Now, if you're a miner and you're unsuccessful, it's no problem, right? There's lots and lots of miners that are unsuccessful. The vast majority of miners are unsuccessful. For every successful story, I could tell you 1,000 unsuccessful stories in mining. Okay, and I mean, it is simply the human condition, though, to chase a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and I certainly understand that and can appreciate that. But I think if someone truly understands mining and is a professional about the situation, and if I was to advise somebody, I would say be very hesitant about getting into mining. I remember when John was starting up and he was asking my opinion, I maybe didn't give him the rosiest opinion in the world of how easy it would be. And John, through intelligence, professionalism, and dedication, was able to succeed when the chips were stacked against him. So being a miner in Africa is extraordinarily difficult. The amount of challenges that we see are exponential, and I don't see it really getting easier. I know that Ruto, who's the new president of Kenya, well, it's been in a few years now, he's trying to get more foreign investment. If you look at foreign investment in Kenya, the Kenyan mining sector, it has fallen considerably in the last few years. And CS Cabinet Secretary Muniz in Kenya is also talking about getting more foreign investment. But how are you going to get more foreign investment when there's no security of tenure? How are you going to get foreign investment when the mining law isn't upheld? Extraordinarily difficult because professional miners, they deal with reasonably important sums of money that they have to outlay. And you can, as a miner, you can go through 6, 8, 12 months of barren zone. You have a big strike that's hopefully big enough to not only pay for the time and sunk costs that you've had to get that strike, but also give you some future birth. But then if you have illegal miners simply come in and steal it, banditry come in and steal it, government confiscation, who wants to mine? Who wants to invest money in that sort of situation, that sort of environment? So I would caution anybody getting into mining. It can be a beautiful thing at the end of the day if you look back and were successful and see what you were able to create. But again, most of those stories have unhappy endings. Even our story, and as I said, my father was the father of colored gemstone mining in East Africa, and that doesn't really have a happy story either, right? So challenge is extremely difficult. I think it takes a great deal to try to overcome them. At some point, as John said, you try to run the most efficient, professional outfit that you possibly can that not only benefits the environment, the people, hopefully the community as a whole, and the whole gem sector as a whole, and hopefully you're able to support your family. However, it's just a straw that breaks the camel's back at the end of the day. And it's something that you have to really look at, you have to crunch the numbers. And as I said, for every success story, there's 1,000 unsuccessful stories. So it's something that we need to look at. I think these countries and governments really need to look at the sector itself and see how they can better enforce the laws that are already on the book. There's nothing to rewrite here. It's good. It's good law. It's good regulation. However, if you don't give security of tenure to legitimate professional mining companies, at the end of the day, that investment is going to dry up, and you are going to have a lack of foreign investment come in, or even local investment leaving the sector, and then it will just be every man for himself in the field, which doesn't lead to good outcomes. So I hope that answers your question, Nicole, as to the challenges in the industry.
I can speak firsthand to Madagascar, not so much East Africa, but the similarities are striking. The number one challenge by a long shot is government and lack of leadership and lack of applying rule of law. Other challenges such as business practices, environmental challenges, finance, which I'll touch upon a little bit at the end, those are a distant second, third, fourth, fifth to lack of good governance and good leadership. In Madagascar, there was a coup d'etat in 2009. The person that led the coup d'etat is now just recently reelected as president, so you can draw your own conclusions about kind of what the positioning as far as democracy and rule of law means. Not only is the government of Madagascar failing businesses such as ours in terms of all the things Bruce mentioned, he forgot to mention export bans. Doesn't really matter in Madagascar because I would say probably 90% of the products smuggled out of the country illegally. But it matters for businesses like us where more or less going back about a year and a half ago, that was the kind of the tail end of a 2-year export ban. There were 2 phases to it. We were the company that it took about 6 months to lobby the U.S. Embassy, get the ambassador involved, who we've always maintained a good relationship with, to kind of lobby the government, which the government of Madagascar doesn't care, doesn't respond, doesn't care about reputational risks, doesn't care about lobbying. It's well documented. Bruce touched upon, mafia and even state level involvement. When you get into things like rare earth elements, certain governments compete very differently than the standards that we're beholden to in this room. China, for instance, in Madagascar, in the quest for rare earth elements, Wagner Group in Madagascar has been very, very well documented, and they played in gold and ruby and looking after some other things. So when that's your competition, it puts you in a difficult spot, not only from a safety point of view, because if you remember, if you've traveled to these places, kind of the famous saying is that a lot of these rural areas are the land of no backup. If someone comes upon you, if it's a mafia organization or your physical safety's in doubt, it's not like walking out into downtown Tucson where you call the police department and actually get a response. There, a lot of times, the police, the gendarme in Madagascar are the ones that are perpetuating and a lot of the mafia activity and being paid and benefiting by it. So the picture is very, very bleak when it comes to government and the absolute failure of leadership, not just with respect to the mining sector, but all sectors in the case of Madagascar. The economy continues to plummet, one of the poorest countries on the planet, not only poor by GDP measures, but just more applicably human development measures, which I think carry a lot more weight than GDP, such as skills-based training, education, access to health care, physical security. All those in Madagascar are bleak, very bleak. So that's the reality, and that's, Bruce mentioned we're successful in terms of always staying true to our values and principles to this day, operating professionally, operating in accordance with the rule of law, but financially successful. The jury's still out on that one. Hopefully, if there's some big brands or designers in the room, come see us at booth 109 and let's do some business. But at the end of the day, there's some very major challenges in these countries because of bad leadership. Some of the other challenges, just to kind of get into, which again rank distant second, third, fourth, fifth, I think, environmentally speaking, the reality is that all color gem mining is small scale, if not micro scale. So the footprint is very small. It's not the same considerations of even a medium-scale gold project or Rio Tinto, Sherritt, now Sumitomo operate in Madagascar, large multi-billion-dollar nickel projects. There's some talk of a rare earth development where there's a lot of deep subsoil chemical leaching that they're talking about doing. Those have tremendous environmental footprints and impact versus artisanal mining or even our type of mining. Bruce's tunneling, we're open pit. It's de minimis compared to even building a 10-story building in downtown Tucson. The footprint of color gem mining is tiny. That's not to accept, obviously, use of, say, mercury in the gold trade. But for us, we're not using any type of chemicals. We're not dynamiting. We're basically just displacing rock and breaking rock. So no big environmental concerns there. In terms of business practices and social impact, there's a very steep learning curve to go to some of these places and for us to kind of transmit or transmit our values and what are our code of ethics and norms and non-negotiables. That took for us many, many years to bring our local team up to speed with, you talk about theft, for instance. In certain societies, zero tolerance, it's not the same as what we might expect over here. So just conveying a certain system of values with people about, we're all in it together, we're a family. It's a kind of a family values approach is what we've always hung our hat on, and making sure that we're constantly talking with our team, checking in with our team, talking with the local community, consultating, not imposing our values or imposing our way of working, but making sure that there's some standard values and understanding of what those values are in terms of how the business takes place. So I think that, and then the last thing as far as a challenge is really the finance. Bruce mentioned, mining is definitely not for the faint of heart. And if you're looking to get rich, I would 100% double down. Don't go into mining. Go study and be a doctor or a lawyer, or go to Wall Street. It's a heck of a lot easier to make money on Wall Street than it is in mining. My Italian partner Federico has a nice little anecdote, and this especially relates to artisanal mining, where there's no doubt when you're digging pits, 2 out of those pits, 5 out of 100 pits, they're going to find something of substance. But for 95% of the artisanal miners, they're not going to make money. And maybe even the ones that find something might not make money. Maybe the real value gets conveyed to the broker or the middleman. So mining is kind of a few hidden lottery tickets spread over a very large area. And if there's not some level of efficiency or systematized way of working, efficient way of working, then there's a lot of luck involved with even when you work efficiently and with professionalism and kind of good process, there's still a lot of luck involved. But when you're kind of just looking to find that needle in the haystack, it's incredibly difficult to really make that work over the long run. And mind you, the reality is that a lot of times, as Bruce mentioned, there's even for local artisanal mining, there's a lot of threats of banditry, and we see that in Madagascar all the time, where whether it's aquamarine mining or sapphire mining takes place in rural areas, and there's once our artisanal miner finds something, they're very much trying to kind of keep it close to the vest for safety reasons, because it's not like there's a strong police presence or a desire to kind of protect the winners. So there's a lot of challenges, but hopefully we can talk a lot about the opportunities, because I think the opportunities with technology and a lot of big hearts and kind of the streamlining of the supply chain lend itself to probably even more opportunities than there are challenges. But it's very difficult to get over that first one, which is the Madagascar has one of the most, thanks to the World Bank and a lot of the great work they've done on. This is one last anecdote, and I'll turn it back over to you, Nicole. But the World Bank had a 10-year project going in Madagascar from, I think, 2000 to 2010. It was cut short by the 2009 coup, and it was mineralogical mapping, geological mapping all over the country. They had spent vast sums of money. Coup happened in 2009. The government that led the coup immediately grabbed all the data. The project came to a halt, and then they're essentially trying to take the data to use for their own purposes to then go offer out permits to the likes of the Wagner Group and other participants that, kind of want to get in through the back door. So those scenarios, even though there's a very strong developed mining code that is really extensive, or just they're not applied like they should be to the letter of the law, and there's a lack of goodwill and leadership at the government level that really sabotages not only the gem mining industry or the large-scale mining industry, but pretty much all industry in Madagascar, and that's the reality of where we are today.
Great, thank you both. So given these challenges, and especially some of the ones that you've mentioned with governance, it makes me think about the terms that we use to define, and I'll just list them: responsibility, transparency, traceability, sustainability, many different terms that we use. I would like to know what terms you use, what you prefer to use in your own businesses, and then how you operationalize that within your companies.
Thank you, Nicole. I'm not a big one on utilizing all of the latest buzzwords or run on social media. That's not my thing. I simply try to follow my father's ethos, where he set up his mining dream of mining for generations as a family, and the, to use a buzzword, sustainability aspect of achieving that goal. So if we've been mining in Kenya for over half a century, we're obviously not just slashing and burning the environment, burning through employees, etc. I have employees that have been with us, been with our company longer than I've been alive, that were with my father. We have employees that have been with us since 1971. If someone were to visit our mine, you would see multiple employees that have been with us for 20, 25, 30 years. So that, it's interesting to say, but we always approached it almost as a family operation. We're not just a family of the Small Bridges family, which when I was growing up was 4, my sister, myself, and my 2 parents, but our employees were part of that family. All of our employees have insurance, so we have health insurance at the mine. We look after all of our employees. They are guaranteed paychecks. That's a big issue, right, in mining in Africa. If anybody were to go into the field, a lot of it, you'll have employees working for someone and being like, when's the last time you got paid? Be like, oh, I got paid 3 months ago, 4 months ago, 5 months ago. And they might feed them, and that's part of the payment, but in the end, it sort of ends up being indentured servitude, right? As opposed to our employees, we've been there over for a century. We've put how many families, kids through school. We've looked after how many employees where they have full health benefits, have a guaranteed paycheck above market every month that they know will be paid. We have a situation where the environment we mine is actually better than when we originally went. Again, I have many flyovers of our mine where you have this green oasis in, again, a semi-arid area. So it's not just the responsibility to our employees, our workers, but it's responsibility to the environment. On top of that, if you look at what my father did with his discovery of Tsavorite, and as well as his influence with Tanzanite and what he did with Tanzanite as well, these are the 2 national gemstones of Kenya and Tanzania. So how many millions of people have benefited due to what my father created there? He tirelessly went around the world lecturing, trying to promote these gems as well as the country in which we lived. I, again, not a shadow of my father was, but I tried to do the same thing to the best of my ability as well. So you have to look at it as a holistic system, where you look at it as what we're doing on the ground in Kenya, what we're doing at the mine, what we're doing with our employees, what we're doing with the environment, what we're doing in the larger gem community as a whole. Hopefully it's of some benefit to the gem sector. And what's of benefit to the gem sector is also of benefit to all of the people on the ground in source country, as well as hopefully around the world as well. You have a situation where it's really a community, right? We're all a community. We come to these shows all over the world. We all know each other. But it all starts back at the mines. If it wasn't for the mines, nobody would have anything to do. We wouldn't have these gemstones that we so love and love to trade. So if you don't manage a mine with a long-term goal, yeah, maybe you do get that lottery ticket, right? As John brought up, I think that's a good analogy. A lot of it is a lottery ticket in general in mining. Even very professional outfits. I've seen very professional outfits go under after not too long. Because at the end of the day, no matter what technology you can use, and trust me, we've used everything that one can think of. I'm happy to go into that later, but at the end of the day, there's a component of luck in there. And if one doesn't look at it as a long-term goal instead of getting rich quickly, the sector itself will die because all the mines will fold and we won't have any of these beautiful gems that we like to sell unless we're all looking at estate and dealing with goods that are already in the market and just basically recycling them through the system. So to me, it's a holistic approach. We do have our code of ethics, but I don't like to throw out buzzwords, sustainable this, transparency that. Being a miner, I can say that we only ever pocketed, which is when you're actually extracting the gem pocket off of the tunnel face. We only ever pocketed when there were members or management. Well, I guess my cousin, so he's still a family member. So only when there were family members at the mine. So we could indeed say, okay, well, this gemstone was mined here on such and such a date, etc., etc. There's not many that could say that. And if we make that, and I'm not saying that should be a prerequisite either. I'm not saying that, oh, I'm better than everybody else, because I can tell you exactly when and where that gem was mined. I have it on camera, and I have family members who were actually there. Because if we took that goal, there'd be no gems out there. Because how many people are in that position? Very, very, very few. Less than 1%, far less than 1% of the industry are actually miners that are fully integrated, literally fully integrated for mining market. And delving into something that I mentioned before is cutting in-house. Keeping value in the country of origin was also extraordinarily important to us because we try to benefit the country as much as possible. Because as a country gets far less on rough product, on export duties, than they do on cut product. And they've tried to implement that in other countries as well, and I'll use Tanzania as an example, where they tried to implement the fact that all Tanzanite had to be cut in country of origin, and you couldn't send rough overseas. Well, interestingly, it turned out that Kenya started exporting more Tanzanite than Tanzania did. So that's interesting because, to my knowledge, and I have made it my life's work to know the area, we were the only Tanzanite miner in Kenya at any point in time. So that, and our production was exponentially less than what was coming out of Block D and Block C. So you can figure that one out for yourselves. But I look at it as a holistic approach. If you don't want to be a fly-by-night, if you don't want to just try to go for that lottery ticket, fold after a short period of time, you have to look at it holistically from the ground up. And really, to me, that's the only way for long-term survival. I won't use sustainability, I'll use survival, because, again, I mentioned it before, mining is inherently unsustainable. Every mine, even our mine, it will have an end of life. And then what do? We do reclamation, turn it back to as close to where we found it. In our case, it will be even better than it originally was. However, with that sustainability aspect, if we look at mining, I also don't want to paint mining in a bad light, because while mining is inherently unsustainable, mining is the reason for human civilization. If it wasn't for mining, there would be no civilization. Absolutely everything that we utilize every single day that's most important to us came from mining, from all sectors. So miners, I look at as brothers, all a family that helped create human civilization. So I don't want to, for a second, people misinterpret. I'm trying to say that mining is inherently bad. It is not. I'm just saying that instead of sustainability, I like to look at it more as a holistic approach and benefiting the entire society that goes into, in our instance, the gemstone sector, and that's from mine to end user and everything in between.
The terms we like to use, just to put it out there, are prosperity, values, value and values, consultation, and Bruce mentioned holistic approach. At the end of the day, it's very difficult to agree on, and it kind of gets into semantics for different, across different venues, different operations, different countries, different customs, to agree on a very narrowly defined set of words. But what's easy to agree on is that there has to be substance backing those words up. So for us, prosperity, which is the kind of the genesis of the business, is about this virtuous cycle where we are a for-profit company, which means we have to present a product that the market appreciates, that's sellable, in order to generate sales, hopefully generate profit to reinvest back in the business. When we reinvest back in the business, we're also trying to reinvest in the community, because a lot of times reinvestment in the community is your best protection and your best support in the absence of leadership and good governance from the government. So that's the idea of prosperity for us, is this virtuous cycle where we're not shy about trying to make money and try to grow our business, but we want to do so not just with a focus on money, but with a focus on prospering. And that means leading good lives, being proud about how we're operating, being transparent about what we do, being able to come up on stage and talk about it and answer questions, making sure that the people that we work with, the communities that we work in, are not being left behind as well. So that for us is the concept of prosperity. The value in values is that if you're a for-profit business, you need to present something to the customer that has value, that they're willing to pay you for, transact. And in today's day and age, it's better to have something of value with values behind it. That's the holy grail that we're all looking for, right? Is to do good business, ethical business, sustainable business in a way that we're proud of, that benefits, people and planet, as well as our internal business. I think the last two words about, holistic and consultative come in more on the ground, kind of at the upstream level of activity, the mining, the value added, and that is that owed to kind of cultural differences and different standards, we're not one to go tell people in Madagascar, in a rural area, this is how we have to do it. We're there to offer best suggestions, but engage in a dialogue and figure out for them what makes the most sense. Simple example, right? Madagascar, I think, is the second largest rice-consuming country in the world. Malagasy love to eat rice, morning, noon, dinner. And rice is not a very high-value crop. As we know from our prior life, with cocoa and vanilla is a really high-value crop. So with extra money, a lot of times the Malagasy will say, I'm going to plant a rice field so I can kind of take care of the rice needs for my family. Well, is that the best business sense of how to reinvest discretionary money for your family, for your community, versus, say, planting vanilla? So those are, at the end of the day, if they have discretionary money, they can make the decision of how they want to spend it. But those are little nudges, or those are good little dialogues, kind of the holistic dialogue about kind of considering what other options are out there. The consultative process of what we do, of not just imposing it's our way or the highway. But at the end of the day, that early upstream kind of, you mentioned the word family-orientated process, values-orientated process has to translate to, prosperity here in Tucson or at other shows or in the customer showroom. It has to translate to value and values. They have to feel like they're getting something special. They're getting a good deal. And I know there's a lot of, I don't know if controversy is the right word, but a lot of discussion around, well, what are the right words to use? At the end of the day, the important thing is that there's substance there. There's substance backing up the words that are being used. And I think that's really from where I shake out is where the discussion should be. Is the substance there? The word ethical, I don't know who brought it up, but it's out there. What does ethical mean? Is anyone, let's do a show of hands, is anyone in the room unethical, right? No hands, including on the stage. So is that really a superlative? Is that a marketing term that you want to lead with? It may be, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's kind of a standard for everyone, and it's not really a superlative or a point of differentiation. So from our point of view, it doesn't bother me if people want to use the word ethical or sustainable or green or what have you, but it would bother me, given the amount of work that we put in, if someone's using terms and the substance or the really good intention or the desire to improve isn't there.
Thank you. So you both talked about sort of communities and workers as family and community engagement. I want to switch gears a little bit, and this is a question that we designed with my students in mind. And the question is, how have you ever leveraged technology to enhance efficiency and reduce environmental and social impact? And Bruce, you gave us a good example of tunneling versus open pit, but just wondering if you could both elaborate a little more.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Nicole. So technology obviously is going at a groundbreaking pace, and we have Moore's Law, so supposedly technology more than doubles. What's the rule, every 18 months, I believe, something like that. So with that being the case, as I did mention about the tunneling, however, I also mentioned that there's still a lot of luck involved. So we're trying to improve our luck because mining is a very expensive venture. To give you an example, at the Scorpion mine, we're below the oxidized zone, so the rock is very, very hard that we have to get through. We're having to blast for every meter of forward progression. So we say to ourselves, tunneling, mining underground, blasting, jackhammers, drills, compressors, generators, this is all expensive equipment. You need skilled labor, workforce, etc. That's expensive as well. How can we better figure this problem? So we've used everything from drones with high-resolution 46K cameras to surveil the area and have myself and our other geologists look at what geological features and indicators we might have that would suggest, and also vegetation. Vegetation will be a good indicator of what might be under the soil, but we've also used infrared cameras on drones to see exactly what certain signature profiles might be. We've used electromagnetic surveys in order to show exactly what anomalies might be in the region, and we have mapped what anomalies are associated with gem deposition. That was a big undertaking, a big project that we did find quite useful. There's obviously core drilling, where you have drilling samples. Now, core drilling, I would say, is one of the more expensive options one could have. If I was to advise people, I would say aerial footage, and you can look at satellite maps as well. Satellite mapping has gotten much better over the course of the last few decades. I mean, My father used to use old geological mapping, but now with the advent of satellite mapping, that's extremely helpful and that's inexpensive. The usage of drones, just simple drones with 4 or 6K cameras, is also relatively inexpensive. Once you get into the infrareds, those infrared cameras can be a little more. After that, expense-wise, if we're going up the hierarchy, looking at electromagnetics, and then finally, I would say core sampling is one of the more expensive options to take. And core sampling can be very helpful, very useful. You have to have done your prospecting pits and boxes well in order to at least be in the general vicinity of where you sink those core samples, because if you're not, you're doing a lot of nice drilling, putting a lot of nice little holes in the ground and not coming up with anything promising in the sampling. So I wouldn't suggest just core sampling without having a strong geological survey there and having done the other steps that I mentioned. But core sampling is sort of the gold standard in the industry, and not just Tsavorite mining, but pretty much any mining, any form of mining. Core sampling has been the gold standard for decades and decades. But as we go with electromagnetics, that is something newer, really at the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years. Electromagnetic surveys have come on strong. I have looked into some of the newer tech that's coming out, such as the sonar, that might look promising. It's interesting to see the different density layer and layering that the sonar might be able to come up with. However, I do want to put this out there. Keep in mind I'm talking color gemstone mining. All of the best technology really is in diamond mining. So I do know a lot of diamond miners, and I discuss a lot of new technology breakthroughs with them, because and basically follow the money, right? The largest amount of money in mining is in the diamond sector, as far as the gemstone industry is concerned. So the diamond guys are very, very much on the forefront, and that's just not in geological surveys and mineralization and finding ore bodies. It's also in cutting and 3D mapping and everything else. The diamond guys really lead the way. I've really tried to implement a lot of diamond features in my business, everything from mining to cutting, 3D mapping. I would say we're certainly on the, if anybody has ever seen what it took to cut, let's say, some of the larger stones I've cut, such as the heart of Merlani, which is 116 karat Tsavorite that's in the Smithsonian and will be for eternity if anyone wants to see it. If you were to look at what levels of technology we really went to in order to cut that particular gemstone, we really followed what they were doing in the diamond sector. And everything from 3D mapping the stone to the CAD programs that we utilized and everything else as well. So that being said, color is behind the diamond sector, but it's nice to see that we're coming on strong. It's nice to see that more and more people are implementing high levels of technology, not just in the mining, but in the cutting. And also, other aspects such as solar has really helped just as far as power, right? Because when I was growing up, I lived at a mine, and basically you went to bed when the sun went down, which in Kenya is pretty much 6:30 every day. And you woke up when the sun came up because you had nothing but a Coleman lantern to really have at night for light. So solar technology has certainly helped a great deal. I think the cell phone has changed mining, gem acquisition, brokerage of gems a great deal. That's technology that you can be in the middle of nowhere, and Masai will take the newest cell phone out from his shuka there and then be on that cell phone, you know. So it's something that I think that's changed a great deal. Motorbikes have changed a great deal, the prevalence of motorbikes in the mining sector. So certainly advances in technology have touched every portion of the sector, not just from exploration, which is more on my side of things, but also to the brokerage side. If anybody is familiar with the umpteen brokers that run around the field, you'll see how technology has changed their lives as well. So it's an interesting aspect. I'm always interested to see what's going to come up next, what the future holds, and I certainly do my best to try to stay on top of what's on the exploration side, as well as gem extraction, right? Because in the old days, a lot of people, and us included, we would use simply tungsten tip chisels or maybe larger tungsten tip nails and blast the gem body off of the rock face. Nowadays, using diamond saws, using powerful hydraulics. I've seen thermal lances being used, all sorts of interesting aspects. You do have to be careful with the heat there, but I've seen a lot of interesting aspects come into the gem sector that people had never thought of before. So it's a brave new world out there, and I do my best to stay on top of it. But those are a few things that we've utilized.
Bruce gave you a high-level viewpoint on the mining because it gets even more detailed. For instance, when you talk about like diamond drill bits, if you've ever shot for diamond drill bits, there's about 20 different types that you can buy. So finding out what the most applicable and right one to choose is a very granular process, right? And not to repeat what Bruce said on the mining end of things, I think the embracing of technology also translates to the value added. Hopefully there's some gem cutters, lapidarists in the room, but they can attest to, depending on the material you're cutting, the types of machines, new and old, the types of blades, the types of diamond powder. So we also, for the labs, we had the pleasure of hosting GIA. I see women in the back at our mine last year in Googling as well. So just collaboration with some of the state-of-the-art equipment that they're bringing to market and in-house expertise they have. We can't take credit, obviously, in-house, even though we're vertically integrated for doing everything, nor would we want to do everything in-house, but to try to be very open and collaborative with professionals, be they labs or scientists. Hanco's one, who's the head of research at the Naturalist Museum in Amsterdam, did a wonderful article that was published in Journal of Gemology, edited by Brendan Lars. Hanco's article was on inclusions in demantoid as tracers for origin, which is a pretty novel study. And of course, he had to use a lot of state-of-the-art equipment to really do great photomicrography and understand what the unique inclusions were. And I think also the technology translates even probably you didn't touch upon this, Bruce, but to sales and marketing and client relation software and inventory management. And I know you're not a fan of Instagram, but Instagram is a fantastic tool for marketing goods. A photo says 1,000 words. So I think if I would summarize what have been the two biggest advancements, more upstream mining value added, it's really the cell phone in terms of the communication opportunities that it provides in solar as well as a power source. We also work with, Caterpillar equipment. There's new battery-powered Caterpillar excavators and bulldozers that are being launched that are things that we would look into. But there's this, I think, also the question about technology opens up a great avenue for people that want to get involved, even if they're not vertically integrated companies, even if they're not miners. There's exceptional ways to collaborate or participate in the purchase or sharing of new technology. Doesn't have to be always the hardware, but even some of the knowledge that you impart about what tools are out there is accretive to the industry as a whole and is a good thing. So we're, I think, similar to you, very open about talking about the equipment that we use and always asking questions of the knowledgeable people of how we can improve our business and make it better.
Great, thank you both. So we have a lot more questions, but I do want to leave time for interactions with you all. So I think my last question would be, What is your call to industry moving forward and its partners in terms of thinking about whatever we call it, a holistic approach, responsibility, transparency? How do you envision the future, and what would be your call?
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. As far as how I envision the future, I think that it's, and I mentioned this earlier, I think that it's heartening that people today are starting to care about where gemstones come from, how they come to market, and the means in which they came to market. I also think, though, that the industry needs to understand the practicality behind how gemstones come to market. And if somebody is looking at a guaranteed way to blockchain or fully trace a gemstone from mine to market, if you're not in the position that someone like me would be, and I'm not trying to say that mine is the way, because if mine was the way, there really wouldn't be an industry, because there's so few people that are in that position. I think that people need to understand that people can do their best efforts, but guarantees that I see out there, I think people have to take that with a grain of salt, because they have to understand the reality and how gemstones are mined, the people involved in the mining of those gemstones, the brokerage system involved in getting those gemstones to market, the cutting process, and everything in between. So people have to look at it from a practical standpoint, not perhaps what they dream would be a world, because of course it's not a perfect world. We can make our best efforts, and that's really all anybody can guarantee is their best efforts. I think people also have to be realistic about exactly how important it is to have the provenance, have the traceability, have the environmental friendliness, etc., etc. I will tell you from first-hand experience that if I have a gemstone and another person has a gemstone and they're of equal merit, as in the same sort of quality, if my price delta is really more than 10 or 15% difference than somebody else's that has an equivalent product, I'm going to lose out on that sale. And I think if somebody looks at, and keep in mind, it's very expensive to mine the way we do. And it's very expensive to pay the employees and look after our employees and have the environment in which we mine. So I would say as a miner, many people often think, okay, Bruce, well, you're the miner. You have the best value. You have the least expensive goods, best prices, etc., etc. My argument would be like, no, actually, I like to think I have the best goods, as in quality and cutting. And I have my 60 years of history in East Africa to fall back on, or my family's. However, as a miner and mining the way we do, we're often not the most price efficient, we'll say, to use a nice term. We're certainly not the cheapest. And mining in the way we do, it's simply more expensive, guys. And at the end of the day, people have to look at how the world goes around, economics, etc. And an interesting aspect is I often look at surveys, and obviously we all know survey numbers can be played with, but when I analyze surveys, and I try to stay on top of it, when people are asked, hey, what additional price, and this is end user, how much more would you be willing to pay for an equivalent product if that product could be guaranteed to be ethical, provenance, all the other buzzwords we have going on? Basically, the numbers 10 to 15% on all those surveys. And those surveys, you'll find that the vast majority of people drop out at 10 to 15% price delta. And as I said, we all know survey numbers can be monkeyed with. However, it's been my experience that if I'm 10 to 15% difference from another vendor in price, I lose the sale. And that's simply the reality. And I'm not complaining about it. I'm very happy with my business and how we do business and the history that we have to fall back on. And for me, my main reason for being in the industry is legacy. I look at my duty in life now to further on my father's legacy and keep his legacy and dream for Tsavorite, his discovery, alive. I don't look at my legacy as being the richest gem miner, dealer, whatever in the world, having the biggest business, etc. I'm simply in this business for legacy. And that's just simply my personal value and where I'm comfortable being. And it's certainly not anything against anybody who wants to achieve the highest levels of financial or company size, etc. Good for you. You know, the world is built on that, and that's perfectly fine. But I think people I'm very happy to see that a growing percentage of people are caring and they're asking how did this come to market, what are the methods in which this came to market, and what's the provenance of the piece. However, I think that we can't get ahead of ourselves and cripple the industry by saying that, let's say, everybody would have to follow my model or it's no good, because you won't have any stones to deal with, guys. There will be nothing in the sector. And people can make best efforts, and I think that's really all anybody can guarantee with the growing attention to it. It's nice to see people care, but at the end of the day, economics win out, and people have to understand how it really works on the ground, all of the challenges that I discussed earlier, and trust me, there are very many challenges on the ground, and how these gems actually get from mine to market. And as long as people can understand that and accept that, I think that we have a very bright future ahead.
My call to action is to get involved. Don't play scared. Get involved upstream. That's not just mining. It's also gem cutting, mineral specimen preparation with the labs. I think far too often, certainly we see this kind of at the big brand level of the market. There's a huge amount of kind of concern about brand reputation, brand value, and a little bit of a CYA mentality. The fact of the matter is if that's your positioning and that's your approach to the market with the advent of new technology, better communication, social media, pictures, the joke's on you if you're choosing not to engage because you're afraid to engage. So again, as Bruce mentioned, you know, our way of working, vertically integrated, mining, value added, wholesaling is one way to operate, but there's so many ways to get involved. If you're scared about going to Madagascar and going to the provinces for health reasons or for security reasons, get involved with value added. There's a really great ecosystem of gem cutting in the U.S. and as well up-and-coming designers that are not afraid to show you what they do, take you behind the curtain, show how the jewelry is made. So that's all, from our point of view, extremely positive engagement. We would love to see more of it, especially from the bigger companies that have the financial means to do so, to really move the needle. We're all for innovation. Innovation is not just technological innovation, it's process innovation. It's, you know, creating a new product and figuring out a new way to bring it to market with a new story. So for us, really, the call to arms is the engagement, you know, with the good substance, with the good intention. And again, not playing afraid, you know. It's never going to be perfect, owed to the challenges, but the first and most important step is getting involved.
Great, thank you both. How about we thank them with a nice round of applause? And then we have time for some questions, and I'll kind of moderate, and I can repeat the question so everybody can hear, as long as I hear it. Yes.
I know the question wasn't directed at me, but I want to take a stab at it. So in my company, Prosperity Earth, I'm one of two white people. So we don't see things in terms of white, black, brown. We're family. We're all brothers. We're all sisters. So I guess maybe here in Tucson, I understand your point, but the point isn't to kind of, necessarily bring someone over in Madagascar just to have, racial representation. It's really speaking from the heart with one voice as a family. That's on behalf of Prosperity Earth. When I go to Madagascar, for instance, I'm the minority, which I'm proud about. It's a great thing. So it's I think if you're a U.S. company operating in Africa, you're frequently the minority. And we celebrate diversity. We love diverse cultures. Even in Madagascar, there's numerous tribes. Interestingly enough, people in Madagascar don't consider themselves African. They consider themselves kind of their own continent, which is really interesting and kind of a social cultural study in and of itself, and a lot of that relates to migration from Asia, Indonesia. But that's my simple answer is, I think it's not really productive to see things in terms of color. And we're certainly, you can speak to your business, I'm sure it's very similar to ours, is we're the minority.
And I would just respond by saying, absolutely. I mean, bring it. let's see some black and brown voices on the stage. I am not, if you can show me, the purpose of this panel was vertical integration. So by all means, I would love to meet those people that have vertically integrated. Maybe next year the panel is different and we do have more black and brown voices. So yeah, absolutely. Yes. Right, and I think you answered your question by saying the purpose of the panel was vertical integration. And I think there's a term collaborative integration that we can also consider that brings other organizations in that are collaborating with people who are vertically integrated. So I think absolutely there's a place. Maybe next year, that's, we could look at that.
Well, I think, Eric, everything stems from mining with us, right? Because that's what we're sitting up here talking about. And I believe I also mentioned, if you look at what my father did, he created a livelihood for millions of people in East Africa, right? Just being in Kenya alone, I think I touched upon the fact that we have put how many families, children through school, maintained their health, given them employment. How much have we donated to Mashujaa Day or Madaraka Day or all the different holidays in Kenya and the local community that we have in Tsavorite, I think that you'll find that my father actually created the first artisanal mining handbook in East Africa, which he put out in the early 80s. I still have a copy of it. And my father, again, I believe I also mentioned, went around the world talking about mining in East Africa, talking about mining in Kenya to bring foreign investment in. That foreign investment is how you help narrow the gap, right? If they come in, they invest in the country, you have employment, you have an escalation in product produced. If you follow the rule of law, everything that is exported from the country are duties paid to the government that then feeds that back into the system. The fact that in a lot of these countries you have corrupt governments where that doesn't happen is extraordinarily difficult, and I think would be an unjust requirement to say that miners have to take over the role of government. I don't think that that is humanly possible. No matter how big a mining house might be, they're not going to circumvent and replace an actual government entity. So when you look at all of that, I'm not sure what else could be done. You're not only benefiting the artisanals with showing them how to better mine through artisanal handbooks, guidance in how to better mine, how to try to make that lottery ticket not such a lottery ticket, but rather, maybe you have a shot at this. And that's really, at the end of the day, all you can do. Again, every success story I could tell you, I can tell you 1,000 that weren't. I think you also have to be very careful about encouraging mining willy-nilly. So if you look at the CBO, which is a community-based organization, and I'll give you the story here if everybody has time. Here you had a situation where Mrutu, who was the governor in Taita, he said, okay, the old Sing mine, I'm going to open up for the community to mine. That community came in, he said, sell your cows, sell your goats, sell your farming equipment, come in, mine, you all become wealthy mining here. You had a situation then that 5,000 people moved in there. And I can show you footage, it's right next to us, where, again, we've been mining over 50 years in an area. Looks like an oasis, show you footage of there. Looks like an atom bomb went off. 20 people have died at that location since it started. One died last week in a cave-in, along with 5 others who were injured. 3 others died in December at Choke Ranch, which is close to the village of Kamtonga, if you're aware of that. You had 75 die in Mali about 2 weeks ago, and another tunnel collapsed. But going back to the CBO, this community-based organization that, again, you have to be careful of if you really understand mining and you understand the area, where what happened is it worked out as a situation of complete indentured servitude, where you had an individual named Gabriel Macharo, who I know people in this room have worked with, and he had set up a situation where he was in charge of the CBO. 2-meter plots were handed out. People were given 2-meter plots to mine. If you're familiar with mining and you follow the vein reef, whatever you'd like to call it, that vein reef doesn't plunge straight down. You follow a 2-meter plot, what happens? You go into your neighbor's plot, right? But you have the sweat equity going down that vein where you've dug, you go into his plot. What do you think is going to happen? Conflict, right? Then people had to take to Gabriel their proceeds from the mine, and then in the beginning he was responsible for selling those proceeds. He made a ton of money out of it. Basically had all of these quasi-slaves working for him, right? Then the other people that made money were the heavy equipment owners, okay? So one way to quickly see what mine is going to go under is if a mine mechanizes too early with heavy equipment, right? Like if I see a startup mine and they have big cats everywhere, bulldozers and excavators, et cetera, I'm like, that mine's not going to last very long because it's expensive. Because people don't think about the fuel, the parts, mechanics, drivers, everything else that goes into it. So then you had a situation that the owners of this heavy equipment brought them in, and you have 20, 30 miners pool their money together in order to rent that D5 for a day, a week, whatever it was, spend all their money there. The heavy equipment, did it do its job? Not really. What generally happens is they cover up all of the indicators, they cover up all of the geological formations that could lead one to better read the earth and see, okay, well, maybe this is an enrichment zone and that isn't. So then they covered it all up, spent all their money. The heavy equipment operator made bank, right? But what happened to the poor people that put their money in? They were left penniless, and they either left or died. And there's still people at CBO, not the 5,000 that were originally there. There's still some people there. However, that sort of situation happens far, far too often, where the local people are taken advantage of. And remember I said Ruto, as a governor, said, hey, do this, everybody. And he thought he'd get votes, and he did get votes, because he was opening up the pot at the end of the rainbow. But the people were so angry the next election, he lost, right? So when you ask, what have we done? We created a mining sector and an industry and a way of life for at least tens of thousands of people that never had that access before. We've created artisanal handbooks to show artisanals how to mine, the first people that ever did that, okay, in East Africa. We've employed and supported hundreds of families over more than half a century of successful mining in East Africa, the longest standing colored gemstone miner in East Africa. And I'll tell you, you don't last that long if you're not doing things the right way and giving back, right? Because if you did, you would get replaced awfully quickly. So, on top of that, during my Father's Day, and then when we were actively mining, if neighboring miners, and keep in mind, we discovered the area, right? So all the neighboring mines, all the other mines simply dot our border. If they had issues and they ran into a problem, let's say they lost their reef, they lost the strike zone, they weren't getting production, my father would go over there and advise them how to hit it, where to go. Also, I think you'll find that the mining community, we help each other. Let's say a neighbor's drill bit breaks, their jackhammer breaks down, their compressor breaks down, their generator breaks down. We'd help them as well. So as far as I'm concerned, I think we've done everything absolutely humanly possible to help. And the sad aspect is, with all of the money that has been generated by Tsavorite and Tanzanite in East Africa, and all of the duties that were paid or should have been paid on the export of that material, how little money did the government actually filter back into Kenyan or Tanzanian society or those communities as a whole? That would be a quick answer. I could keep going, but I'll give John a shot.
Yeah, I think that's where the real obligation lies, is with the government in terms of really amplifying the scale. But on a micro level, I would agree with Bruce. I'll speak a little bit more concisely and just with one anecdote, and that is to say the best thing we can do is lead by example. So really be proud and transparent and collaborative in what we do, and train and educate. Right? And the answer in Madagascar is the same as how I would approach wealth disparity here in the U.S., is encourage people to use available resources, libraries, schools, teachers, coaches, to get training, get experience, get knowledge to improve their lives. So we're all about that. We again are not, similar to Bruce, are a little shy on kind of marketing a lot of the social and environmental impact that we do. We talked recently more about the mangroves, because if we're not, it becomes a little bit of a liability, but it's certainly not in terms of Prosperity Earth what we lead with the product. But just one anecdote that I think I've shared with like one or two other people came from last September, and I wasn't being rude looking at my phone. I was searching for this buried in my archives, but it came from our main gem cutter. His name's Haja. And Haja had asked me when I was there with Nicole and Jenna and my daughter in August, had asked me for money for his son's college education. And we, after leaving, thought about it and gave him the money. And he wrote to me September 29th, "Dear John, I hope this message finds you in excellent health as well as your family. First and foremost, I would like to express my sincere gratitude for your invaluable collaboration and ongoing support. I would like to take the opportunity to thank you warmly for the generous financial assistance you provided to my son, Antonio. Thanks to your generosity, he now has the opportunity to pursue his studies at the university, a dream he has cherished for a long time. Your gesture has had a profound impact on our family, and we are extremely grateful for it. I am pleased to inform you that we have received the funds you generously provided. Nirina, who's his wife, who we also employ at our gem cutting, and Antonio immediately used his money to pay the first installment of the university tuition fees this past Tuesday. Antonio is eager to start his studies, which will commence next Monday." It's one family, one student, but it's hopefully part of a larger movement of what I mentioned about getting involved. And it doesn't have to just be a vertically integrated operation, hopefully from the big brands, hopefully from small designers, the gem cutting ecosystem. We're currently training 2 Congolese in our lapidary in Tana. So I think is kind of there's a lot of little anecdotes that we could share. But at the end of the day, you really, I think, move the needle by having a big heart and really good intentions and educating people and sharing knowledge, sharing wisdom, but most importantly, leading by example, living your life with substance and walking the walk. That's my shorter answer.
Christina.
What's like the dream in your head, and whether it be social sustainability or environmental. Thank you.
Let me take it. Just to break up the rhythm here at the end, I'll go first. My dream is really more attention given to upstream activities. And again, it's not just mining, and there's no one-size-fits-all model. So the more we're already engaged, you guys showed up to participate in the discussion and listen, but there needs to be more of that across our industry, not just on the mining end of things, but on the value-added end of things. So the vision, again, is I think this is already happening with the designer ecosystem, especially in the U.S., where they're very focused on understanding where their products come from and using it as a way to even compete against some of the bigger, well-capitalized brands for marketing, for market share. All of that's extremely positive. So the dream and the hope, again, is that there's much more of these panels, not so much focused on downstream activities, the brands, the final product, the trading, which is still very important, but more on the upstream activities, the mining, the origin countries, the artisanal mining activities, the cooperatives, the associations, as well as the value added. That's my dream.
Christina, quick question. Are you talking about personally or for the industry? Personally. So personally, which is a strange thing to say, personally, my goal is actually to turn my father's mines into a national heritage site and an elephant sanctuary. So to no longer actively be mining. That is my end goal. My father's dream was always to make an elephant sanctuary out of the area, because we're right in the migratory route between Tanzania and the Tsavo National Park. So from a personal standpoint, that is my goal. I have a great deal of inventory. I continue to work with universities around the world on Tsavorite as far as chemistry, etc. I lecture all around the world talking about Tsavorite, furthering my father's dream there. But my goal for our actual holdings would be a national heritage site, as Tsavorite is Kenya's national gemstone, as well as the Scorpion mine being the most famous and largest Tsavorite mine in the world, as well as my father's dream for having an elephant sanctuary. So that is my goal. Again, not that I'm saying I'm against mining. I'm just saying that that's my personal goal. It's what I'm working toward as big a way as I can, whether I am allowed to, and I am fully willing to fund it myself, and I've told the Kenyan government that, and I also have some large wildlife conservationists that will also be with me on that. Whether they allow me to do that, if I was a betting man, I'd say probably not. But knowing how things work, but if I'm telling you what my goal is, what my dream is, that's what I'm working towards, that's my project right now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, all of you, for your time today and really interesting conversation. Personally, I really focus on definitions of terms that we use in the industry. Shout out to the Lost Project, check it out for shared definitions. And the words value addition have come up quite a few times today. When I've been in conversations about value addition in the past with folks in the industry and impacted communities, or those speaking on behalf of impacted communities, value addition to me has seemed like a very holistic approach to kind of work at reversing some of the more colonialist impacts of our industry. And I'm wondering how you folks understand that word and how you define it. Is it only happening for it that you see through the taxes and duties that your companies pay? Or do you think about value addition in a broader sense as well?
We definitely think about value addition more broadly. I want to go back to cocoa and vanilla. One of the things in the cocoa industry that we used to talk about when we were one of the only chocolate companies in the world that made chocolate as a finished wrapped bar at origin in Madagascar. The company used to be called Maricas. We then sold it. It now is named Beyond Good. So if you shop in the natural food channel, it has a little lemur on the package. Still great chocolate. But the statistic that we used to give is the global cocoa bean trade, 10 years ago now, was about $5 billion. The global chocolate trade was $105 billion. So from a general sense, everyone can kind of get their head around the fact that if you take cocoa beans, you obviously need sugar and you need emulsifier and a few other additives to make chocolate from cocoa beans. There's a huge value accretion. So the question becomes, well, where does that value accretion go? And it's not so simple of an argument, because we sold through UNFI. It's a big distributor. I'm sure you've seen their trucks on the highways. UNFI distributes to Whole Foods and a lot of other markets. Even when we were adding value in country and producing finished chocolate bars that were wrapped, they were hand wrapped by women, we then outgrew that ability to continue to hand wrap, so the scalability wasn't there. So the women were still employed, but they added automated packaging machines. Even when the product was exported as a finished bar, there was value accretion, but the price that we sold it to UNFI was then increased, let's say, like 2.5 times before it was then sold to Whole Foods, and then Whole Foods kind of doubles their margin. So there's always going to be along the supply chain. In the case, to kind of come closer to home, if we sell a gemstone to a Tiffany, for instance, Tiffany has to make money, right? They have an enormous sales and marketing costs and real estate costs. So you're never going to be able to capture all value and keep it in country. But to your question, we think about it in a general sense is that if there's the skill and capability to add value in country, for a lot of reasons, not least of which are economic, but also green transportation costs. Why do we need to send all the cocoa beans to Switzerland or Hershey, Pennsylvania? And I'm not against Hershey, Pennsylvania. They have a great product and a great chocolate. A lot of sugar added compared to ours, but the fact of the matter is we had a kind of a different approach, which was a little bit of a process innovation of collapsing the supply chain and trying to keep more value in country as a kind of an employment mechanism. And it goes back to kind of Eric's great question, which is, well, how do we, just by nature of being vertically integrated and trying to cut gems in country or do mining, we're an employer, we're creating jobs. And hopefully, if it works and we're successful, it creates, fast followers and more people can kind of engage at the periphery of the business. So for us, again, it's not the be all and end all, and it's not, there's one last quick thing. In the case of Madagascar, and this again speaks to kind of the failure of vision or leadership or good governance, is in terms of tax. Just recently, the government of Madagascar had higher taxes on finished goods than they did on rough goods. So you think about that. Economically, they're incentivizing me to export rough rather than to cut in country. And when GIA came with us to visit the Minister of the Mine and talk about, science and research, and if there's any collaboration, the last thing on the ministry's mind was job creation, which is a big problem, or worker rights or worker benefits. So again, we're a very small company. We're a family company. But hopefully by leading by example and being thoughtful and educated about some of these issues and kind of having an open dialogue and listening to, different viewpoints and questions, we can, in the case of Madagascar, arrive eventually at a better place than where we are today.
I think we're standing between you and lunch. So I would suggest maybe we should. Okay. All right.
I just had a curiosity question. As miners, what surprises have you come up with in your minds that you're not targeting?
Question.
What
I
surprises?
said, as a miner, have you come up with any surprises in your mind that you weren't targeting?
Other than Tsavorite,
Right.
sapphire.
I see.
Unexpected.
Thank you. So, yeah. So for us, definitely scorpions. Certainly snakes. Every now and then you hit a snake nest down there when you're tunneling. But as far as gemstones are concerned, interestingly enough, where we are, in my personal opinion, where we are in East Africa, if you were to go 100 kilometers in a 100-kilometer radius, so let's say 100-mile radius of Mount Kilimanjaro, you'll find my personal opinion, the finest colored gemstones in the world. Obviously, I'm somewhat biased being from that neck of the woods, but we have come across, so on mining Tsavorite, we mined and struck tanzanite less than a kilometer away from where our Tsavorite mine is. And we had the only tanzanite mine, only recorded tanzanite mine outside of Tanzania for several years. And interesting aspect about the tanzanite was extraordinarily deep color and would hold its color down to 2 millimeters in size, which, if you know tanzanite, is unheard of. The caveat to that mine is the largest fine stone it ever produced was about 9.5 carats. So the largest tanzanite on record is actually over 1,000 carats. So that gives you an idea. We didn't get huge stones, but we got great color. That would be one of the stones. We have golden groschler, so hessonite, on our claims. We hit ruby.
again, the ruby was either cabochon grade or very fine smalls that would lend itself to melee or finer smalls. We hit golden tourmaline and chrome tourmaline, as well as rhodolite. So just on our claims, which are 9.2 square kilometers in size, we have mined all of those gems, and obviously the number one goal was mining Tsavorite, but we came across all of these. Well, they weren't really a surprise to my father because he knew what the mineralization would be, but we came across all of these other gemstone varieties and species during the process of mining. And we've mined throughout the country, we mined extraordinarily fine aquamarine as well, but in our exact Tsavorite location, we've mined those particular gems, and it's been very interesting. They're nowhere near as economical as our Tsavorite main line, but it's a nice distraction every now and then, and it's interesting. And growing up, I got to learn a lot about different varieties and species because we mined multiples within that little block. So there's been several surprises as far as mineralogically, and those would be the ones. And then, of course, as far as animals and everything else, lots and lots of surprises. But mineralogically, it would be those gems I mentioned.
For us, it was finding a massive block of low-grade opal that we didn't realize was opal. So that was a huge surprise. We recently exported it. It's carving material, so nothing, gemmy. And then aside from the mineralogical surprises, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but because we have full salaried employees, our driver is a guy by the name of Karo, K-A-R-O, and a very pleasant surprise was a couple years ago to go back and hear that, after the couple of months he had negotiated a contract to rent some land and plant vanilla vines. So when you hear kind of a periphery act, and we weren't driving the process on that, to hear those little surprises, it's always kind of a positive social surprise.
Something like comments giving you, but I want her to introduce and then I'll continue speaking.
Yes, thank you, Robert. My name is Ernest. I'm small miner. I mine green tourmaline, rhodolite, and granite. I'm also General Secretary of Tanzania Women Miners Association, Tawoma. Tawoma now is 25 years now. Last year we celebrate anniversary. Yeah, we have 7 members all over the country. Yeah, we are working with women in Tanzania in mineral value chain. Thank you.
Karibuni.
Yeah, so thank you so much for the presentation that we got from you today. We're really pleased when we hear companies or organizations that want to support communities. It's not only about the stone, but also supporting the surrounding communities. So we also work with companies like that. I'm working with Christina from PACT, but I'm based in Tanzania. So for us, of course, we are, listening to the communities, what they need. And for us, is like looking into their future. So one of the things that we recommend really for the business people, companies, work with us so that we can tell you what they need. Because we are there always working with them. One day there will be no stones. So for example, now we have economic strengthening program. Because one day you have no stones in the communities. So we want to look into what they will continue thereafter. So we have a series of things that we do with them to ensure that they continue with the generations. Thank you.
And that wraps up our panel for today. Please give a round of applause